Chapter 1. Debbie Shulman shifted her backpack so that it sat more firmly on her shoulders, tightened the loose strap, and pushed a strand of golden brown hair off her damp forehead. "This is some climb," she said. "Maybe this wasn't such a good, neat idea." "Oh, stop whining," Lisa and Brennan said shortly. "We can't chicken out now." She studied the steep road ahead that rose from the valley, where they were now walked up to the evergreen forest ahead of them, and from there was lost in the shadow of the rocky slope. "Let's stop here and have something to eat." She sat down on a patch of grass beside the wooden fence that enclosed a field of wheat and took a Hershey bar out of her pack. Debbie sat down beside her, leaning against the backpack, tucking the stray strand of hair under her blue handkerchief. "How many of those do you have left?" She wrinkled her nose at the Hershey bar. "Seems to me you've lived on them all across Europe." Lisa lifted the flap of her pack and looked in. "They're enough. Want one?" Debbie shook her head. "We should have gone with Greg and Frank after all. To visit some old uncle in Rapia? Not hardly. But suppose we don't make it to Siasura today?" There hadn't been a car along here for half an hour. Lisa looked back along the road, squinting her dark eyes to see the distance. "How did I know it would take this long to walk it? I thought we'd catch a ride before now." Debbie took a gulp of lemonade in her canteen, capped it, and reached out to flick a crawling insect off the leg of her denim shorts. "If we don't make it, we'll have to camp out in the woods someplace, so come on, let's get going." "Okay." Lisa got up, brushed the dirt off the seat of her jeans, and picked up her pack. Debbie was right. They would have to get to Siasura before the dark and find the youth hostel there. Tomorrow Greg and Frank would be there to meet them in Frank's MG, to drive them to Bucharest. If they weren't there, the guys might go on without them. That would mean they'd have to hitchhike tomorrow, too. Debbie was trudging on up the road ahead of her, and Lisa hurried to put on her backpack. But as she turned, she saw the gleam of a car in the distance. "Hey, look, Deb, this might be our ride." It was a silver Alfa Romero convertible, with a dark-haired man driving, who slowed as he approached them. "You girls want to ride somewhere?" he asked in heavily accented English. Debbie had run back as the car approached, and now she smiled at him, nudging Lisa in the ribs. He was good-looking, all right. About 25, with curly hair and an attractive smile. a pleasant, olive-skinned face. "Are you going to Sayasora?" Lisa asked. He smiled and nodded. "Sure, hop in." He reached across and opened the passenger door. They unfastened their packs and set them in the back. Then Debbie got into the front, with Lisa behind her. "My name is Juno," he said, extending his hand formally to each of them, in turn, so they told him their names and answered his questions as they drove. They were from Pasadena, California, USA, college students touring Europe for the summer. They had been traveling on trains and buses and staying in youth hotels. But it was close to the end of their vacation, and they didn't have much money left, so they'd been hitchhiking. They had planned to see Sayasora today and drive on to Bucharest tomorrow with some friends they had met in a hotel in Germany. Yes, they were having a wonderful time, and they thought Romania was beautiful. "And what about you? Do you live here?" Jeannon nodded. "Not far away. Then maybe you know if there really was a Count Dracula who lived here in Transylvania?" Lisa smiled at him. Jeannon answered gravely, raising his voice above him of the motor and the rush of the wind. "There was a real Prince Vlad called Dracula who lived in the 15th century. Vlad Tepes. That means Vlad the Impaler. A cruel man, some say. But was he the vampire Dracula? You know, like in the movies?" Jeannon shrugged. "Who can say? Who knows what is fact and what is legend? He lived more than 500 years ago, after all." "That was fiction, Lisa," Debbie said. "You know it. I hope you don't mind that I have to make a stop before we drive on to Sayasora," Jeannon said. "It is an old castle near here. Perhaps you will find it an interesting place." "I'd love it," Lisa said eagerly. Debbie glanced at her watch. "Will we make it to Sayasora before it gets dark?" "Oh, yes. We have plenty of time." He accelerated softly, or suddenly, so that they whirled around the curves of the road and the trees that bordered it. It became dark and dark and blur. Lisa felt clutches at her arm for support and heard her startled squeal. But in the moment, a car had turned onto a narrow dirt road through the forest, and speed was impossible because of the hollows and ridges stretching ahead of them. Gino was silent now, seemingly absorbed in his job of holding the little car steady on the road. Lisa looked up at the mountainside and saw the ragged and gray top of the castle visible over the trees. "That? There it is," she said. "Looks something out of a horror movie show." She leaned forward, excited. "Oh, really?" Debbie's voice was dry. "Haven't we seen enough old, crumbling buildings? So you're used to them by now." The road was getting steeper. The car took it slowly, straining on the grade until they found themselves in a level clearing paved with cobblestones, and the castle loomed ahead of them. Juno stopped the car at the broad stone steps leading to an arched entrance and silently helped both girls out of the car. Debbie smoothed her hair back under her handkerchief and looked around. "Say, this place really is old. It's falling apart." Lisa ran up the steps and looked through the open arch. The late afternoon sun glinted on the cracked and splintering glass left in some of the windows and made dark shadows along the stone walls. The place seemed as still as death, and up here there was a chill in the air she hadn't noticed on the road. She shivered suddenly. "Come with me." Juno grabbed Debbie's hand, who was standing near him, and walked through the arch, across the covered courtyard behind it. Lisa followed. "Can we go inside?" "Oh, sure," Juno said. He led them to a large wooden door, still intact, and pulled at the ornate door handle. A cold breeze came at them through the open door, smelling of dust and decay. Both girls hesitated outside the opening, but Juno hurried through. "Come on." "Hey, just a minute." Debbie grabbed Lisa's arm and stayed where she was. "I don't want to go in there. This place looks like it's falling apart. And besides, that it stinks." Lisa felt the same way. She was much more interested in antiquity than Debbie. Still, the castle had an aura about it that she didn't like. It was more than just the decayed condition of the building, although she couldn't have said what, but it made her reluctant to stay here. And besides, they didn't know Juno, and they shouldn't have left themselves open for anything unpleasant. You might have a bunch of rough friends hiding in there, as far as they knew. But even at this thought crossed her mind, she knew it couldn't be true. There was such complete stillness, such dead silence, not even the sound of birds. For only a moment, an unreadable shadow passed over Juno's handsome face. Was it anger? Before she could decide, Lisa saw that he was smiling again, laughing at them. "You are both afraid, are you? Or what?" He threw back his head, and the sound of his laughter echoed down the empty hall. "Nothing will hurt you. I promise. There was nothing here except the owner of the castle." "There's someone living here?" Lisa couldn't believe it. "Who is it?" "You will see for yourself." He is the prince, but he has been in hiding for many years. He has been walking down the hall, and now both girls looked at each other. A prince? Debbie was interested. Hey, it might be something to tell everybody at home. We met a prince. Maybe he'll ask us out to stay for dinner. I don't know, Lisa said, wondering if Gino could be lying. But why would he lie? Had he seemed to be walking into this place confidently, as though sure of his welcome here? Shouldn't we knock? She asked as she followed both of them down the dusty hall. No need, Gino said over his shoulder. He is expecting me. Why is he in hiding? Debbie asked in a loud whisper. Is it politics or something? You must ask him about that, Gino said. It is a long story. The hallway was high-ceilinged and spacious, with arched doorways on both sides. Lisa looked into some of the rooms they passed, catching glimpses of the dusty-laden cobweb-hung interiors. Hey, wait, she said loudly. Gino, are you putting on us? These rooms haven't been used for years. He turned to her and put a finger on his lips. No, he said quietly. He does not use these rooms, of course. He has no housekeeper. He uses only one part of the castle. Yes, that would be reasonable. You could hardly expect an ex-prince to go around sweeping floors and cleaning. And if he lived here alone, he'd only need a couple of rooms. Lisa hurried along after the others. At the end of the hallway, they mounted a narrow wooden staircase. And this time Lisa fought back the unreasoning worry that was causing her skin to prickle. After all, Debbie seemed to have lost all her doubts. But then, celebrities were one of Debbie's specialties. In high school, she had a huge collection of autographed pictures of rock stars, movie and TV personalities. Lisa remembered waiting at the airport for hours, and Debbie, one boiling hot afternoon, so that Debbie could get a photo of Princess Grace arriving from Morocco. Now here was her chance to meet a real prince in person. Lisa wondered what he would look like. Probably a picture of decayed nobility, white-haired, perfect manners, charmingly old-fashioned, and very aloft. The staircase ended on a narrow landing with 3-sided doors, one directly ahead and one on the other side. Gino tapped at one in front of them, waited a moment as Debbie pulled her handkerchief straight and looked nervous. And then, when there was no answer, Gino opened the door and beckoned them in. The room was large and dim, the only light coming through the unbroken pane of a narrow window, high up on one wall, just under the open-beamed ceiling. There were thick oriental carpets on the floor, sofas and chairs, upholstered in rich brocades, were scattered around the room. A scent of spices hung in the air, and everything was neat and clean. But still, Lisa felt a chill she couldn't explain. She sat down on a straight-backed chair near the door. Where is he? Maybe he's not home today. Gino shook his head. No, he will be in another room. Perhaps. Stay here. I will go and find him. Isn't there a mirror in here somewhere? Debbie looked around at the bare walls. I'd like to fix my face. Mirror? No. You do not need one. He seemed suddenly very nervous, Lisa thought, and rather sad. What's the matter, Gino? She asked him. Doubts she couldn't name nagging against her under her consciousness. He stood looking at both of them for a moment, his face shadowed, his red shirt showing dark stains now under the arms, and the whiteness of a smile gleamed at them. You are both so beautiful, he said. You will be pleased. Moved swiftly towards the door and opened it. I will find him now. Then he slipped through. The door was closed behind him. Lisa ran to the door and tugged at the handle. Wait! We'll go with you. The door wouldn't open. She tugged harder, but a voice, rising, Gino, wait! And now Debbie, who had been staring at her in surprise, ran to the door. Here, I'll open it, she said, and brushed Lisa aside, but the knob wouldn't turn for her any more than it had for Lisa, and she dropped her hands, looked blankly at her friend. Why won't it open? He must have locked it. Lisa's voice was a moan. Why? Debbie's face grew pale, and she turned suddenly and pounded on the door. Lisa pounded too, shouting to be left out. A voice outside stopped them. Gino's voice, calling to them. I'm sorry I had to do it. He takes my people, the people of our town, unless I bring him others. They could hear footsteps coming down several stairs, and then Gino's voice again, farther away. I am sorry. Both of them leaned against the door, helplessly, their faces against the hard wooden surface, listening to his footsteps till they could hear no longer, and they listened to the silence. Lisa turned away first, looking hopelessly around her, fear making her numb. Oh God, what now? Debbie was crying. We have to get out of here. How? That window, up there. Debbie pointed. Quickly, both of them pushed one of the sofas underneath it and piled a chair on top of the sofa. And then Debbie climbed the chair as Lisa held it steady. But although Debbie was the taller of the two, she couldn't reach the window. "Try something else," she said breathlessly. So they found a low table in the corner, put it on the sofa, and set the chair on top of that. And after several tries, Debbie finally managed to balance the shaky structure and reach the window. But it's a solid pane of thick glass. Can't see how to open it. Break it. Here, I'll get you something. Lisa took her hands away from the chair and immediately began to sway. So she clamped them back around it again. There's a big bat over there. It's looking at me. Debbie drew back suddenly. The tower had built, collapsed, and she fell on the floor as the table and chair crashed around her. "Are you hurt?" Lisa knelt down to her. Debbie shook her head, her cheeks wet with tears. "Even if we could crawl out there, it looks like a sheer drop down, and it's getting dark." They sat on the floor together for a while, silently, as the sunlight faded and shadows grew in the room. Finally, Lisa said, "Where do you think that guy is who lives here?" "I don't know. What's he going to do with us?" "Maybe Gino's crazy," Lisa said. "Maybe he gets his kicks from locking girls up here, telling them scary stories and then letting them out in the morning. Maybe he'll be back and let us out later." She felt better as she said this, and she could see that Debbie did too. It might be the locals' idea of a joke. "Some joke," Debbie said. "Let's not ever hitchhike again, Lisa. It's not such a hot idea." Lisa stood up. "Listen, let's find something to use to protect ourselves, just in case there's someone here." They searched the room, but could find nothing heavy enough to use as a weapon. And finally, they smashed a wooden chair against the door. The door didn't show any damage at all, but the chair broke into pieces, and they each took one of the curved wooden legs. It was almost completely dark in the room now. There was almost nothing to provide a light, so they sat together on the sofa, clutching their chair legs, talking in low voices about what they would do next. When they were free again, now they would stop, listen for seconds, and hearing sounds from below or footsteps on the stairs, but there was only the dead, chilling silence. So they quickly spoke again, and the sound of their own voices giving them strength. At last, tension and weakness and weariness overcame them, and they slept, lying together on the sofa, under the window, afraid to be separated. Lisa woke suddenly. The moonlight streamed through the high window, making a pitch of light in the center of the room, and there was Debbie, standing motionless in the light, her eyes wide, her head lifted as though listening. She had taken off her handkerchief, and her hair fell loose on her shoulders. Her arms were on her sides. Her body seemed rigid. "What are you doing?" Lisa asked her, sitting up. There was no answer. Debbie didn't even seem to have heard. She was staring at something outside. The patch of moonlight, something near the end of the sofa. Lisa followed her gaze and then screamed. A man was standing there. Lisa could only see a dim outline, a gleam of white that may be part of his shoulder, and two eyes that glowed dull red in the darkness. As Lisa screamed, the eyes turned towards her. "Be silent!" The man gave the cool command. And Lisa found that she couldn't scream. She was still afraid. But along with the fear, she felt a fascination. Her eyes had given her some unconscious message. She had no wish now to run away. Her necklace. The man pointed to the little gold cross that hung on a fine chain around Debbie's neck. "Take it off her." Lisa stepped forward, impelled by his words, and pulled the gold chain from Debbie's neck, letting it fall to the floor. Another man moved out of the shadows. He was slender and pale, dark-haired and straight-featured. He wore a black suit with a black cape and flung over his shoulders. Lisa watched, fascinated, as his arms went around Debbie, who turned his face up to his, her hair falling back from her bare, white shoulders. The man was murmuring something, and Debbie seemed to be under his spell, too, for she listened as though in a trance. Now the man was kissing her throat, but he lifted his head for a moment. Lisa could see his teeth, bared, long, and sharp, and then with a sudden swiftness that it sunk into Debbie's throat. Debbie cried out, and the sound swept through Lisa's body like a shock, jarring her into motion. Now realization flooded through her, and she knew who this man was and what he was doing, and terror made her back away, shrieking helplessly, repelled by the horror that she was powerless to stop, seeing the blood run down the other girl's neck, to be sucked up greedily by the man who held her. There was no escape. Lisa was trapped in her room with a monster, watching Debbie finally slump out of his arms and fall senseless on the floor. Now the red eyes turned toward her, and now again she was held motionless by his gaze, feeling strange and unnatural sensation. mouse hypnotized by a cobra, waiting for an embrace of the undead, waiting